Welcome to the Unplugged podcast, brought to you by the team at Under the Mango Tree.
Thank you so much, Kirk. Welcome to the Under the Mango Tree podcast.
It's great to be part of this.
So for you, Kirk, how do you define fitness and what has your journey been like?
I think about fitness, it's changed a lot for me. At a certain period in my life, I actually took it very seriously and was a competitive athlete. And for me, it was all about performance and athletic performance and getting the best out of a certain event and working towards that for about 20 years, actually. My last major race was 2006. But, up until that point, I was a competitive athlete, and that was a very different fitness paradigm and thinking there. Since that date, and since I've actually moved on to the next phase of my life, I still value fitness, but it's more around longevity now, which is a really key thing for me. Yeah, my kids basically are in their early teens now, and I always wanted to be able to be active with them.
Growing up, was fitness or sports still a major part in your team?
It was a boys' school where sport was really important, like they really focused on that. So it was near the end of my schooling where I started to focus very much on athletics, middle distance running, and leaving school really thinking a lot about this thing called triathlon, which, in the late 80s was starting to blow up. There was a race in Hawaii, which, just was so captivating. It's a 3.8 kilometer swim, then a 180 kilometer bike ride, and then a marathon to finish in this humid environment. It just sounds crazy. And for whatever reason, it just really lit up for me. And I started to do triathlon straight out of school. I started with small triathlons, sprint distance, Olympic distance, did that for 10 years. At some point was able to get to Hawaii and do that as well. So
what are the things that you're looking forward to now? Like what is on your calendar for, let's say, this year or next year? What are you preparing for?
Yeah, it's like, I still think, and maybe it's habit, maybe it's the way I am, but, and it's identity as well. I really define myself a lot around my endurance passion, I suppose. But yeah, so each year I try to pick an event which is going to kind of stretch me, and I have to prepare for it. So it takes usually a 2-3 month kind of prep. Typically now they're not races anymore. I'm much more interested in things which are kind of creative. 2 years ago, I did this amazing thing when I was living in the US, actually. It's going from the lowest point in the US, which was a place called Badwater, which is in Death Valley, to the highest point in the US, which happens to be about 280 miles in distance and separation. But basically, myself and 5 other guys, we had to ride all night. We wanted to do it within 24 hours. So that was the challenge. And so we set these kind of parameters to give it some constraints and make it interesting. So we rode all night, got up our bikes at 9 a.m, and then took the mountaineer's route to the top of this mountain. And we just made it. We did it in like 22 hours, I think it was, just before sunset. It was pushing ourselves. It was out there. It's not about a race and stuff. We're just doing something really interesting and fun. That's the kind of thing I like doing now.
So let's say for me and a lot of our colleagues, if you want to just look at what we should be doing as we embark on our journey to probably one day do a triathlon like you are, or do something which is very, very like aspirational, but we need to start small. So what are the building blocks to our fitness journey?
Being active is so important now. We're realizing now with the latest health studies that is probably of all the 4 or 5 key things we do to try to actually create well-being. It is hard if you don't have some reason for that. And so it's important to create a why. It really is. It's really, really key. But then you've got to make it a priority. You really do. It's got to be no compromise. It's not a negotiable thing. It's got to be part of and parcel of everything you do. And again, this could be simply doing a walk each day or every second day, but just getting to a point where it becomes habitual. It's really, really key. Very few people regret that run once they finally got out there and done it. Like, it's one of those things where it's amazing how the body responds so well to some activity. Doing it in groups is so key. Like, I think it's some way that community that comes through sport is so important as well, but we're time compromised and it's hard for us to be able to commit to schedules and training with a team. And that's why individual sport is so interesting for you to find those activities which you get pleasure out of, which actually fit in with your agenda and schedule.
Growing up, I always used to play basketball, but over the years, I realized that getting 10, 12 people together with changing circumstances for everyone, family commitments, etc., it was just too difficult. I actually switched to badminton, which, I can play with another person or with a group of 4 in doubles. So I think those logical decisions as you grow just have a certain amount of time that you can spare. I think it makes a lot more sense. How do you keep your activity levels up during the workday? Like Noble in the Geo team in India ends up walking 10 floors every day. Very neat way to kind of hack the time that you have and then get some bit of activity and fitness in. Do you do something like that?
I actually commute each day. So we have a bike path, and so I literally ride 14 kilometers to get to work and back. So bookends my day really nicely. It's just an incredibly privileged situation. And if I haven't done my commute, I will actually try to schedule on my day, potentially a run at lunchtime. You know, one of the amazing things at Google, I've only been here a year and a half, but we have an employer who's so encouraging of us, you know, taking control and doing some active things. That wasn't the case in my previous company. If I took a run at lunchtime and my previous boss found out I was running and not actually on calls, I'm telling you now, he would be a little bit questioning it, and in a jest way, but it just got on my head. So please, you know, make the most of this too.
What are some of the apps or the fitness device that you use?
Pretty active on Strava. Every time I go and do something, I post purely because I'm actually interested in what other people are doing. I might find out new routes that friends of mine are doing. So it's really interesting to be able to have that online community through Strava. When it comes to tracking, it's a double-edged sword. You know, for some people it works. Like, you know, it's nice to have the metrics, it's nice to understand measurement about where you are and try to see still self-improvement. The body is a really interesting thing. You know, if you're looking for numbers to go up and all of a sudden they drop for a while, that can be quite demotivating. And so you have to really understand what the device is really providing you in terms of the data as well. So it's so important not to take that in a way where it becomes obsessive and then you want to see improvements the whole time. Because one of the things that people don't really understand about fitness is that the most important part of fitness is rest. When you stress the body will actually will break down. The muscles break down, what's called overcompensate. So the body will come back and will actually come back stronger. But unless you rest, it actually gets in a downward spiral. That can be a worse thing for you. So these devices are very good for you to actually measure when you are ready to go back and to hit yourself hard again.
So just wanted to understand from you, how do you look at nutrition, which is like the other part?
My wife's a sport dietitian, so she always gets nervous when I talk about any of this because she's the one qualified, but she's not here at the moment. But it's very tough because there's so much noise out there about nutrition. It's a very faddish thing. There's always going to be the next diet or the next potential way to hack the body through detoxing. You have to be aware of the balance. At the end of the day, you know, the right meal size, the right timing of those meals is really, really key there. I think we're very lucky at Google because Google provide the basis of really great nutrition. The macronutrients which you need in your body are all there for us, and so it's up to us because essentially you want that plate to be like a rainbow. Just, you know, getting up, going for a walk, doing a small yoga session before you eat, it actually can help get the metabolism running. I make sure I have my breakfast. So people skip that, but it's really, really key. Meal in the middle of the day is where I tend to have a large one now and try to cut back a little bit at night. I don't do any fasting. I do eat meat. I have red meat once a week. I don't over-index on the red meat. Fish is so key, particularly fatty fishes, like, you know, so the salmons, and 2 or 3 times a week at least of that stuff. The first 10-15 minutes after the activity is so important for you to get protein in. And that can be literally a glass of milk. It's simple as that. Like, it doesn't have to be an expensive protein shake or something. You know, serving of yogurt, glass of milk, they're really, really key things to help with muscle recovery. And often where the body's mistaking hunger for hydration. So, you know, ensuring that you're continuing to remain hydrated throughout the day is such an important thing. For someone like myself, I actually have a lot of issues with hydration. I mentioned that Hawaiian Ironman. I've done it a couple of times. The very first time I did it, I completely bombed it. And the reason is someone of my size, when I go to Hawaii, I'm actually losing 2 liters an hour in terms of perspiration. So I had to literally figure out how to supplement and get back 2 liters every hour across a 9-10 hour event, which is just insane. My salt imbalance is always going to be upset. So I'm very attuned to that and how to bring in electrolytes and sodium into that as well. So for some people like myself, that's a big issue. And you know, if you're out there doing activity, particularly in Singapore or a hot environment, this was really, really key.
There are a lot of recommended diets available, like Atkins, keto. Do you have any experience going through them, or is there a way to kind of, you know, distill through all the noise and filter in to say, all right, this may be useful?
For me, it's back to actually finding what's working right for you, making sure you get the right professional advice on this as well, because, you know, you can read so many articles and be very confused about this. When I do these longer events, what I'm trying to do is actually to burn more fat than I am in glycogen. So one of the things I do sometimes is actually I go into a training session. It could be a 3 or 4 hour training session without having too much carbohydrate, and then making sure I stay in what's called zone 2 and really get that fat burning thing happening. It's important to get your blood tests done. That's another thing as well, which can help you figure out whether or not you're covering off all the nutrients you need. Like anything in life, you know, just do the right diligence, get the right advice, make sure that you make the right decisions which is right for you.
Also wanted to kind of quiz you on a few things or key terms that we keep hearing. Love to get your reaction by saying whether it's overrated or underrated. So first one, training to failure.
It's super important. Again, you've got to be careful. Put this in context. Like, you need to be able to build towards that, have the right conditioning first before you get to that point. From a cardiovascular perspective, getting into the reddish zone or your threshold, doing some intervals around that for 10-15 minutes, once or twice a week is so important. Then within the gym, lifting weight to failure. For me, it's about pushing back muscle fatigue, not muscle bulk. I don't want muscle bulk. So for me, in the sports I do, I don't want to actually create large muscle mass, which is actually sometimes from smaller reps, lower reps. I definitely get to, on a high rep program, to failure, where the last 8 or 9 rep is really hard. And that's a similar thing to failure, but essentially it can be a body weight, to be frank, if you're doing it correctly. Anyone going to the gym, making sure you get the right advice, making sure you're lifting correctly, that you have a program. And before you get to that point where you're going to failure, you've been doing it for a couple of months, if not a couple of years.
This one I think I know. Full range of motion.
Mobility is so important. And that's where compromise, sitting in a chair like we have the last 50 minutes. I generally will warm up for 5-10 minutes just to activate certain muscles, making sure my mobility is right before I jump into a gym session.
No cheat meals, like eating really clean.
Everything in moderation. Like, it's so important. I still, like, my biggest vice is ice cream. I love fries. I'm just like anyone. And once or twice a week, I'll indulge on that. In fact, it's so important to be able to do that, to be able to not to deny yourself the pleasure from doing that.
Ice baths.
I've been using ice baths for a while, particularly when I've been doing some big events, preparing recovery, making sure that I do that. What I've just realized over reading the last 5, 6, 7 years, of course, and Wim Hof really advocating this, is that actually there's a lot of benefit to things that chemically happen. 2 kind of key systems which are happening autonomously in the body, like, this parasympathetic and sympathetic. And so you got this fight or flight thing happening, and the body needs to have that activation happening of the sympathetic nervous system. One way to bring that on is through cold water treatment. And it doesn't have to be an ice bath. It can be literally in a shower for 30 seconds under cold water. I also feel good after it. It's actually, there's something that happens after doing that, which is I'm pretty buzzed for an hour or two, and it's a good feeling.
I want to say thank you so much. This was just lovely.
If anyone has any questions, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to have a conversation. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Unplugged podcast, brought to you by the team at Under the Mango Tree. See you next time.